And it is being dubbed Farmageddon. The Senate today passed what it calls a sweeping overhaul of the nation's food safety system. Now, it basically allows the government to really crack down on tainted foods and would, of course, give the FDA more power in the process. It sounds like a good idea, right? Well, many folks say that this is just going to monopolize our food supply, and that's just a start. George Hemminger of Survive and Thrive TV joins us now from our studios in Los Angeles. George, good to see you. I know you have some passionate views about this whole thing. And I have to tell you, reading certain articles about it, it seems like this is a really good thing, especially for consumers. They'll be safer, their food won't be tainted. What do you think about all this?
Well, instead of calling it the Safety, the Modernization Act, we should be calling it the Corporate Regulation Monopoly Act for Monsanto. I mean, this country, Washington, D.C., is just out of touch. I mean, everything's about safety. Safety will protect you. But what's happening is Americans' rights are being trampled upon. And what more, who are these people in Washington, D.C. to tell me what I can put into my body? It makes absolutely no sense.
George, talk a little bit more about Monsanto. What is it? Why are there so many critics of this company? And what is the connection between the company and this bill?
Well, if you look at the bill, and I've read it, and with all the amendments, this thing is beyond recognition of a normal person to understand. And what happens is these big corporations support these bills. Not only with money, but they support the politicians. And if you look who supports this bill, it's the big agricultural businesses. It's not the small farmers. We have had a victory with this act. In the act, there is an amendment that farms that are under $500,000 in revenue will be exempt from the plan. But it's passed the House, it's passed the Senate. We'll see what happens. It would be great if Obama stepped up to the plate and vetoed this thing. But, the big corporations are motivated by profit. They're not motivated by the health of the normal American citizen. And this whole concept of cracking down on farms and the small farmers goes totally against where we're headed as a society. I mean, people want organic foods. They want healthier food. They want, why not get to the point where we're not having to depend upon big, huge corporations to provide our food? Isn't that something that would be healthy for the economy, to rely upon smaller farmers that produce healthier food for us?
George, just want to backtrack on one of the things you said about whether or not Barack Obama is likely to veto this. He actually released a statement that said he was in support of this, so that's not going to happen. But is there a counterbalance, though, to these companies, to these corporations, that is actually effective? I mean, you mentioned small farmers, but you're kind of saying that nobody's really paying attention to them.
Well, what's happening is Americans are starting to realize that the food we eat is filled with pesticides. We have some of the highest cancer rates in the world. Something's going seriously wrong with our health, and they're starting to figure out that it has to do with the food that we consume. Just how government tries to crack down on cannabis, marijuana, there's still going to be people that are growing it at home, people that are growing it in their backyard, and farms are going to do the same thing. There's a huge movement of people that want organic produce and raw foods.
But George, I mean,
if anything, I want to encourage people.
Where is this movement? Because you said something earlier. You said, what is wrong with Washington, D.C.? And one of the things that really stuck out to me here is the fact that this bill is one of the only pieces of legislation that actually had bipartisan support on the Hill. This is not something that we see very often these days. So clearly someone wants to see this go through.
I just think it has to do with money. I mean, these big corporations support these politicians, and when they want a bill pushed through, they're not going to pay attention to the people that elected them. That's the weird thing that's happening in America, is people are looking at this bill going, what the heck is happening? What are these people doing in Washington, D.C.? And they don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They just care about the people that are funding their elections, and that's showing in this bill.
You know what? The other interesting thing about this is the media coverage of all this. At least in the New York Times, I read an article, basically said both versions of the bill would grant the FDA new powers to recall tainted foods, increase inspections, demand accountability from food companies, and oversee farming. Not really touching upon any of the things that you're talking about right now. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's because the big corporations control the media outlets. I mean, they're dependent upon the financing for advertising. I mean, why aren't we talking about the big, remember that big scandal this summer where 1,600 people got infected with salmonella, you know, the whole egg scandal. Well, that company is one of the top 10 egg producers. They're a perfect example of corporate production of food. Well, the FDA just allowed them to start to go back into business. So they're producing eggs. I mean, this is a company that has been criminally charged with animal cruelty for what they do with their chickens. I don't even want to go into detail with it, but it just shows that, you know, we're about the big corporations in America, not about the small guy.
But a lot of folks are saying this is a case where, you know, people are always angry at the government, saying we want them out of our lives. But then something like this happens, what you mentioned earlier this summer. They eat bad food, they get sick, and then they start relying on the government and support, you know, more power to it via the FDA in this case.
Well, I mean, this isn't the American people speaking up. This is the Washington, D.C. corrupt politicians that are speaking up, that are passing this stuff. I mean, the video that I put up got 100,000 views. People all across America are upset with, in fact, CNN had a poll, and they said, what would you guys like to see with regulation? They said, sure, regulate the big companies, but the small producers, you know, let them be locally regulated. We don't want the FDA. We don't want the federal government telling us what we can put in our bodies and what we can grow in our backyards.
That's a very interesting point. You know, more people are affected by this than we know. I mean, it literally is every single person, plus those small producers, those small farmers. As you mentioned, George Hemminger of Survive and Thrive TV, live there for us in Los Angeles.